So, Jeremy, why don't you, can you show us can you tell us more about your project at Google and also how did you work about it in terms of what were the parts, what phases were there in the project, and how did you go about from ideation to the final project?
Yeah, I had a couple of projects while I was there, because, like I said before, like I shot for the stars and just tried to take on as much as I could while I was there. So some range from smaller to bigger projects, but similar to how I approach a lot of my projects, it's just like at the beginning was asking a lot of questions and sort of amassing a wealth of information. And
Right.
Google has amazing UX researchers that do tons and tons of research, on like various topics. So I just, picked their brains for however long I could and asked like questions to certain ones. I worked on certain sort of problem sets, until I, sort of found my strategy within the data that I was pulling.
So let's take the Duo project for example, right? Like you asked the questions, you proposed your flow or some transitions. Your manager was like, "Hey, why not? Like this is pretty good stuff. Why let's implement bits and pieces of it into the actual flow." And then what happened
Mhm.
next?
uh, After that, it was after I got the okay that things were, going good, and this idea was, um, like viable. I took it upon myself to reach out to other people that were outside of my sort of like organization to figure out more of the mechanics of it, because the idea that I had was a little bit more technical than something they had done before, and I wanted to make sure it was feasible. So I reached out to the sort of team that was working on the device to like learn more about it, and learn more about that, its capabilities, like what it can do and how I can implement that. And I brought that back to my team and showed them like, okay, this product is about to come out, and these are all the things that it can do. And I showed them that as well. Like I took that on as a side project. Um, but that immediately like opened up their eyes, like, okay, all this untapped potential, that we're not, utilizing is out there with this product. And now like they have a better understanding. So it helped them sort of design or think about how they could be designing for this in a very different way.
Right.
Uh, and that was all from asking those questions and then synthesizing that and sort of coming up with, a strategy. So like a strategy statement for, this is what Duo is now, and this is what Duo could be with these opportunities. And here's a like strategy to do that all. Um, and is a lot of that may be like non-traditional to how sort of designers sort of look at it. But my my grad program is in a traditional advertising school, which is kind of interesting. So like a lot of that work is like a lot of what like the strategists do is they sort of synthesize the information and present it as like a strategy or like a boat sort of like pushing this concept forward. And so I presented them with that and was like, we can take Duo from this to this on this device if we, follow this strategy and, have all ideas sort of like, um, cling from there.
Yeah.
And that was maybe about halfway through the summer that I did that. And they were just like, wow, like we didn't even think of all these opportunities that we could dive deep into. We want you to explore more of that. So I really stayed very high level with my projects, and drove them toward like implementation, like concept designs. But it was definitely more of like, here's what the future could be, and here's the, research, the backing, everything behind it, and here's some potential, implementations of that idea.
Right.
Was my main sort of like project was more like, I would say product visioning, is what it lasts on, which is super dope because that's something that I enjoy, is thinking about the entire like brand ecosystem and not just smaller brand touch points, but you know, how is every single experience with this service, so Duo, going to be beneficial and positive for, you know, the user that comes to it. And so it's more than just, okay, this is something that lives on a, you know, device, and it goes into, this is something that someone's interacting with at their busiest moment of the day. You know, what impression are we giving back to them? Uh, so more of that sort of thinking, like higher order design thinking, is what the space that I really enjoy being in, um, and then bringing that to life.
Nice. Is there any more
Um,
to the case study?
yeah, so I mean, the last thing to sort of like wrap it up was following that implementation. I also worked on that sort of like high level stuff. I worked on smaller stuff, so like screen sharing, and more features coming to like Duo Web. So that involved definitely more like meticulous design work and worrying about, okay, um, is this feature discoverable? And also like, how are we explaining this feature to make sure people understand it? Screen sharing is like complicated if you actually think about it. Like, you know, we kind of laugh at it, but every time you share a screen, like, can you see it, sort of thing. So it's not a lot of feedback to let you know what you're doing, or also
Right.
like what's sharing and not being sharing. And that was interesting thinking about, you know, what are concerns that can go in the screen sharing, and
Yeah.
how do we mitigate those concerns and sort of give people peace of mind. So that was another project I worked on, and I drove that from ideation all the way to actual implementation, but also like including, um, I think the main thing here with all of this is to sort of do what's asked of you. So like, yes, I had the project, which is in this example, one was screen sharing, but also do what they ask of you. So I implemented that, but also plus one. So, and my plus one is like, how can you take this further and leave them with something else to think about at its implementation? So
Right.
after I showed the developers and the designer I was working with, you know, this is what this implementation is going to look like. Like, here are the red lines, here are all the, you know, the slices, all that good stuff. But this is where it could be. And here we have opportunity to sort of do these other things, and planning, even if it's just planting that seed in people's minds. I think it just shows them that you're not only thinking about the now, but you're thinking about the later, and you're very much like future proofing ideas, because problems will come and problems will go, but as long as you're staying ahead of them, you'll be able to mitigate them before it gets done.
That makes a lot of sense. That adding, not just doing what you're told, but adding your value and your bit of it as
Mm-hmm.
well, which shows how you
Mm-hmm.
also are as a designer. You're good at being a team player, but also you're good at adding your own originality to it.
Right, and I think that's definitely important. It's just like, every one of us is unique and has our own personality and our own lens.
Yeah.
So having the ability and freedom to add that, you know, you might not always be able to get the chance to, but when you do, it can be very lucrative, and also just so like your passion for the space that you're working in,
Right.
I think.